Okay, welcome back everybody. I hope you've had a chance to look at the 360 video and tried to figure out what the Ecosite classifications were for at the top of the hill, which is where I'm sitting now, and at the bottom of the hill based on the vegetation from that video. The Ecosite is done with this particular book, and there'll be a link at the bottom of the video for you to access it, but you can download this guide from the government website. And just to help you out a little bit, we are in the Boreal Plains Ecozone. We're just south of the Weyerhaeuser Mill and along the Saskatchewan River. And so Boreal Plains Ecosite starts on page 202. We need to find out what ecosite we actually are. And so the guide says, are we on a site that has a lot of organic horizons, a water table? No. And then does the site have more than 10% tree cover? Yes. And then coniferous trees are more than 75% of the canopy, and we can say yes. And then the guide says go to the Boreal Plain Coniferous Ecosite Key, which is the next page over. And then it asks, is jack pine greater than 50% of the canopy? Yes, it is. Is jack pine greater than 90% of the canopy? Yes, it is. And then the big question now is what happens on the forest floor? And is the reindeer lichen cover 25% of the forest floor? And if I'm looking directly in front of me here, I would say yes. This reindeer lichen, this particular stuff here, covers more than 25% of the forest floor, and so that means that we are at a BP2 ecosite. And if you turn a few pages over, the BP2 ecosite is jack pine lichen ecosite on moderately fresh sand. And this ecosite guide is really interesting because it has a lot of interesting facts, and just from a vegetation perspective, this chart here, actually every millimeter in tree height represents a meter of tree height. And so if these trees were 20 millimeters, it would be 20 meters tall. And then this next dactyphic grid here gives you an idea of the species richness on the bottom and the moisture on the y-axis. And you can see we're on the top corner here, which means that we're in a very dry site with not a whole lot of different kinds of vegetation species. And as you look around, there isn't a whole lot right here where I'm sitting. So this would be classified as the BP2. And then this book also gives you a number of species you might find here. There's some soils information, and it says that you might find Eutric brunosols or some dark gray chernozyms. And then it also gives you some facts related to forestry. And since I am a forester, just to let you know that it will give you ideas on how tall the trees may be, the kind of volume you might find on a site like this, the density of trees, and the site index, which gives you an average or an idea of the height of a tree at an age of 50 years is what we use here in Saskatchewan. So a lot of great information in this book, but in terms of ecosite, now we know that we're dealing with a jack pine forest with a lichen-dominated ground story. And what we're going to do now is go down to the bottom of the hill and see what this classifies out as an ecosite based on the changes in vegetation that we see. So now we're down at the bottom of this Catena sequence in the depression, and as you can see behind me, there's a lot more vegetation than there was when I was sitting at the top of the hill. And now we need to find out what the ecosite classification is for this site. And going back to our coniferous ecosite key, if we start again, jack pine is greater than 50% of the canopy, and if you look, yes, it is. And then is jack pine greater than 90% of the canopy? And now, I'm not sure that's necessarily the case. We might be on the fringe here, but I see some trembling aspen here. There's a white spruce here. There's some white spruce back there. So I'm going to say no. And then a spruce, 25% of the canopy, and it probably is not 25%. So then we go down to BP4. And BP4 is a jack pine, trembling aspen, feather moss. And you can see down here that we do have a lot of different kinds of mosses and feather moss. So we are in this BP4, which is a real change from the BP2 that we saw at the top of the hill, and that's mainly due to moisture. I know we're in a depression, but we are also on an area that is very, very sandy. We had brunosols or regosols at the top of the hill. And as you come down here, and if you were to dig a soil pit, you would also find regosols down here. However, at about 90-100 centimeters, there are lenses of clay in this regosol, which is then holding up moisture. And because of this extra moisture, in this soil profile results in a lot more vegetation. Behind me is willow, which is very characteristic of wetter sites, and so you know that there has to be more water here for this kind of vegetation to survive in these kinds of environments. So we have a BP4 jack pine, trembling aspen, feather moss ecosite, and again this is on sand, but because of these lenses of clay deeper in the soil profile, holding up the moisture, allowing for these other kinds of species to be here.